Hi everyone and welcome you all for the module 10 of our WSET Level 2 preparation journey, and this module we're going to be learning about Chardonnay for WSET Level 2. So when it comes to Chardonnay, it's one of the most popular white grape variety in the world, and also it has ability to grow in different climate conditions like cooler climates, moderate climates, as well as in warmer climate conditions. So it produces broad range of styles from inexpensive high volume brands to really expensive great age worthy wines. So in level 2 it describes Chardonnay quite in detail with all the renowned regions, their characteristics, different styles from these regions, etc. So everything will be discovered in this module. My name is Nilantha and I'm a WSET Level 3 certified sommelier, helping you to prepare for your WSET Level 2 qualification without feeling overwhelming. If you find these contents are useful and helpful for your journey, please do subscribe so that someone else can discover my channel and get help for their journey as well. So without further ado, let's get started about Chardonnay. What are the characteristics of Chardonnay? So the aromas and flavors that are found in Chardonnay wines are heavily dependent on where the grapes were grown, meaning based on the climate conditions they are vary. So basically the characteristics, the flavors, aromas that we expect that we get from these Chardonnays are heavily dependent on where the grapes are grown, whether they are grown in a cooler climate, moderate climate, or even warmer climate conditions. These primary aromas and flavors of Chardonnay can be heavily vary. For example, typical cooler climate conditions Chardonnay can have high acidity levels, light to medium in body, with the flavors of green fruits like green apple, pears, or citrus fruits, meaning that lemon or lime, and sometimes with wet stones. Like these wines are literally feels on the nose like wet stones. Even after we try them on the palate, we might get these flavors of like biting a wet stone, or sometimes these earthy flavors can detect in the wines come from these cooler climate conditions. And then from moderate climate conditions, these Chardonnay tend to be more medium to high acidity, not extremely high acidity, but they tend to be like medium to high acidity. As we know, as the weather get warmer, the acidity levels that retain in these grapes quite lower, so that we can expect to have a medium to high levels of acidity in these wines. And they also have medium to full bodied with flavors of lemon, stone fruits, and sometimes with tropical fruits. So as these weather conditions get warmer, the flavors, aromas of these grape varieties tend to be slightly riper. That's why we get them like stone fruits like peach, apricot, whereas we had green apples, pears, like green fruits in our cooler climate Chardonnays. But when it comes to the moderate climate, we get those riper fruit flavors. And as we go to the warmer climates, meaning the temperatures are relatively higher than moderate climate or the cooler climate, therefore these wines tend to be more fuller bodied with medium acidity. So acidity levels even drop from moderate climate conditions when it comes to a warmer climate. And the flavors are dominated by the tropical fruit flavors, meaning that the grapes are super ripe in these regions. Therefore they tend to produce wines with heavily ripe fruit flavors like tropical fruits, pineapple, passion fruits, like mango, everything tend to be more ripe on the palate. So these warmer climate Chardonnays tend to be dominated by tropical fruit flavors. Winemaking and maturation options for Chardonnay. So this is quite important to understand, because winemakers can adapt different techniques and different steps during this winemaking process to achieve the style of wine that they're making from these Chardonnay grape varieties. The first thing is the acidification process. It's a process widely used to balance the alcohol and body of the Chardonnay wines made in warmer regions. Now we know in warmer regions the acidity levels tend to be dropped and the sugar accumulation is faster and higher. Therefore, to balance the alcohol levels of these wines and the body of these wines, the winemakers are allowed to use these a manual process of adding acid into these wines. And then we have the malolactic fermentation. We have discussed about malolactic fermentation in our previous modules where we discuss about winemaking options, and this basically do add buttery creamy flavors like dairy flavors into the wine, and also it softens the harsh acidity of these wines from malic acid to lactic acid. And then we have the least contact, meaning that maturing the wines on the dead yeast after the fermentation, all the dead yeast are formed as a layer on the bottom of these vessels, so the wine will continue to mature on them, and these least contact can add the flavors of bread and biscuits like crisp flavors into the wine. And then we have the oak barrels. During the fermentation or maturation adds body and flavors like vanilla, smoke and coconut. So the winemakers can choose to ferment their wine in oak barrels or mature their wines in oak barrels, and these barrels aging or the fermentation can add flavors like smoke, vanilla and coconuts into these Chardonnay wines. And then we have some winemakers use oak chips or staves as they are less expensive. So not every winery, not every style of wine can afford the oak barrels because they tend to be very expensive. Certain wines are selling at lower price, therefore if the winemakers intend to impart oaky flavors for these wines, they can choose the options of having oak chips or oak staves into these wines to add those secondary flavors of vanilla, oak and spices, but they will not be firm, they will not be high quality like those flavors imparted from the oak barrels, and it is relatively cheaper for winemakers to use these chips or staves instead of barrels. And one thing to keep in mind, so these are all optionals. So if the winemaker wants to make a style of wine from Chardonnay in a restrained style, meaning that without overwhelming the primary fruit flavors of the grape variety, they can choose to ferment and mature their wines in inert vessels where they do not impart any flavors, and also they can avoid the usage of oak barrels or oak chips, and also the avoiding malolactic fermentation during this winemaking process for Chardonnay styles as well. Important regions for Chardonnay. I hope you'll pay a close attention to this slide because this gives all the information that you need to know about these renowned regions known to produce high quality Chardonnay, outstanding Chardonnay for WSET Level 2. So the first thing, of course, the Burgundy, France, where the home for Chardonnay wines. Chardonnay is the main grape variety of Burgundy region, and it is the widely planted from Chablis to Mâconnais. So now we know Burgundy is a region stretched from north to south, starting from Chablis to the Mâconnais. So Chardonnay is the main grape variety that has planted from Chablis to Mâconnais throughout the region. And starting from Bourgogne AOC, also Bourgogne means Burgundy in French. So this is the regional appellation wines from Burgundy and can be made from the grapes grown anywhere in the region. They're usually simple with flavors of apple, lemon and high acidity. If you see Bourgogne AOC on a wine label from Burgundy, meaning that these are the regional appellation, regional styles, the entry levels of Burgundian wines, and they can be made from the grapes grown in anywhere in the region. And also they have very less restrict when it comes to wine laws, the do's and don'ts for the winemakers and grape growers. They are quite free than the other appellation systems. All you need to know for Bourgogne AOC wines, the grapes can come from anywhere in the region in the Burgundy. They tend to be with simple flavors like apples and lemons and high acidity levels in these wines, if Chardonnay. And now we come into the Chablis AOC. So this is very important. Chablis is a village appellation with cooler climate. So it produces dry wines with very high levels of acidity and flavors of lemon, apple and whetstone. So these are the general characteristics of Chablis wines, and the best vineyards are located on slopes with better aspects and labeled as Premier Cru or Grand Cru. So the best of the best wines coming from Chablis regions are the vineyards that are located on slopes with south or southeastern aspect to maximize the sunlight exposure to accelerate this grape ripeness. And these wines are quite expensive, and they're quite high quality as well, and more complex, more structured than the Chablis AOC. So Chablis basically have four different quality tiers, starting from Petit Chablis, Chablis AOC, and then we have Premier Cru and Grand Cru status. So the Grand Cru is being the pinnacle of these Chablis wines. And wines are more flavorful and complex. Typically, inert vessels are used, and frost is major climate challenge. So, Chablis wines are typically they are restrained styles. They are produced without the usage of oak, or by avoiding this malolactic fermentation, because they want to create a style that really represents what Chardonnay grape variety is. And also the frost is one of the biggest challenge for these grape growers. Because of these cooler climate conditions, frosts are very often forming during the grape growing season. So it's a major challenge that grape growers are facing in Chablis region. So we might get asked in our examination, what is the most climatic challenge for grape growers in Chablis? Of course, you've been given four answers, and one of them could be frost, and frost is the right answer. And yeah, we'll be discussing about example questions for Chardonnay grape variety as well in upcoming content, so stay tuned. And yeah, let's move on. And now we have Côte d'Or. It's meaning the golden slope, and Côte d'Or is one of the most prestigious sub-region within the Burgundy, and it's a globally renowned sub-region in the world of wine. So the climate of the Côte d'Or is moderate, and grapes achieve more ripeness with flavors of stone fruits than Chablis. So Côte d'Or tend to located quite middle of the Burgundy region, whereas the Chablis tend to be located on the northern part of the region. Therefore, the Côte d'Or receives moderate climate conditions, so that the grape varieties can achieve a slightly more ripeness than the grapes that are found in Chablis region. Therefore, the flavor profile tend to be slightly riper with stone fruit characteristics like peach and apricot. And then we have the Chardonnay production is more focused in the area of south of the city of Beaune, known as Côte de Beaune. So the production of Chardonnay wines are more focused into the southern part of the city of Beaune. So it's known as Côte de Beaune. So there's so many sub-regions within the Côte de Beaune that are producing very high quality Chardonnay wines, and Côte de Beaune is the regional style for this sub-region in Beaune. So village of Meursault AOC, Poligny-Montrachet AOC are famous for producing very good to outstanding wines. So Meursault and Poligny-Montrachet, Chardonnay-Montrachet, likewise, these are the most famous and renowned sub-regions in Côte de Beaune to produce very high quality and outstanding wines from Chardonnay grape variety. So oak fermenting, maturing and aging them intact with lees adds extra body and complexity to these wines. So unlike in Chablis, the Côte de Beaune, these Meursault, Poligny-Montrachet, Chardonnay-Montrachet, these are the sub-regions that producing Chardonnay style wines with oak fermentation, oak maturation, as well as lees aging. So these wines are more structured, more complex, as well as more complex. Premier Cru on Grand Cru vineyards in the villages known to produce the best wines that can develop tertiary characters like hazelnuts and mushroom for decades in the bottle. So Premier Cru and Grand Cru, like we discussed in previous slides, known to produce the best of the best Chardonnay style wines that can even further evolve into tertiary characters like hazelnuts and mushrooms in the bottles, and these wines can age for several decades. Most of the white wines tend to be lose these fresh characteristics as they age for several years, but these wines made in Premier Crus and Grand Crus vineyards, they tend to benefit from further aging for even several decades. And because of this demand and very high reputation, these wines of Premier Crus and Grand Cru wines command very high price. So because of this high reputation and the demand for these wines of Premier Crus and Grand Crus, they often demand very high price point. If you compare the price of a Grand Cru wine from Burgundy with other similar grape varieties, similar styles wine from other parts of the world, they demand exclusively high prices, and also they deliver such a high quality and value for this money as well. And then we have the Mâconnais. It's a sub-region in south of Burgundy, meaning the southern part of the Burgundy, and they produce Chardonnay style wines, mostly unoaked, with the flavors of melon, peach, and lemons. They are labeled as Mâconnais AOC. So Mâconnais AOC wines are more simple with the primary fruit flavors like lemon, peach, and melon. Because of these, the warmer climate conditions, they are able to produce this peach like stone fruit character wines from Chardonnay grape variety, and wines that are labeled as Pouilly-Fuissé AOC, known to be more fuller bodied and complex fruit flavors. So the wines that are labeled as Pouilly-Fuissé AOC, it's a sub-region within this Mâconnais, and they tend to be more fuller bodied, more complex fruit flavors of like a mixture of stone fruits and tropical fruits, and they're fermented and matured in oak barrels. So these wines are more muscular, more structured wines than the Mâconnais AOC wines. And then we have south of France, so situated closer to Mediterranean coast with warmer climate conditions. So in south, even further south, the climate tend to be more warmer. Because of these vineyards are situated closer to the Mediterranean coast, they receive cooling breezes from the ocean, and they able to produce very high volume of Chardonnay based wines with the flavors of peach, pineapple, and banana, like tropical fruit flavors. And most of them are labeled under IGP, meaning that indication geographic Portuguese, also protected geographical indications, and they have very less restrictions when it comes to winemaking and grape growing as well. So depending on the quality, the winemakers can use oak barrels or oak chips and stuffs as an alternatives for barrels to add body to these wines. So depending on the quality, the selling price of these wines, the winemakers can use these barrels or chips and stuffs as alternative to barrels for their wines to add body and more character to these wines. So now we have California in USA. It's a very important region for this Chardonnay grape variety for WSET Level 2. In California, Chardonnay is widely planted and wines are made in range of quality levels. So Chardonnay is widely planted in California, and the wines are made in range of different styles, from inexpensive high volume brands to really expensive muscular age-worthy wines. So inland in Central Valley is cut off from any sea influenced by mountains and has a very warm and dry climate. So in Central Valley is one of the regions that we need to focus. They tend to produce high volume inexpensive wine because of the vineyards are away from the sea influences, so that they use the irrigation to supply water for these vineyards, and they produce very high yields to produce high volume Chardonnay wines. And these wines are medium acidity, medium bodied with simple flavors like apple and peach, and may use oak chips or stuffs to add oak flavors. So these wines are medium acidity, medium body as well, with simple flavors of apple and peach, and they may use oak chips or stuffs as alternative for these wines. Because of the barrels are quite expensive, so they cannot afford to produce these high volume inexpensive wines and afford this expensive barrel for these wines, so that they use the oak chips and stuffs. And these wines are labeled with no GI and just as California. And the other two sub-regions that we need to know is Carneros and Sonoma County. So in Carneros, it's cooled by morning fogs from San Pablo Bay, and then Sonoma County is cooled by cooling sea breezes from Pacific Ocean. So Carneros and Sonoma County tend to produce high quality Chardonnay wines because of these climatic conditions. And then we have Napa Valley. It's known to produce full-bodied Chardonnay with pronounced tropical fruit flavors with vanilla and spice from New York. So in Napa Valley, the style is totally different from other regions. They tend to produce more fuller-bodied, more muscular styles of Chardonnay with the influence of new oak, meaning that they tend to impart more pronounced flavors from the oak like spices like vanilla for these wines. So yeah, Central Valley tend to produce high volume, inexpensive wines, and Carneros and Sonoma County produce high quality wines from these climatic conditions of San Pablo Bay and Pacific Ocean. And then we have Napa Valley, known to produce fuller body muscular styles of Chardonnay with the New Oak influence. Santa Barbara County, also in California's Central Coast, is known to produce quality Chardonnay as vineyards receive cooling sea breezes. Styles are varied from wines that are similar to those Côte de Beaune through to more tropical, high alcohol and more pronounced flavors from New York. So even in Santa Barbara County, they're also known to produce wines similar style to Côte de Beaune with like mixture of stone fruits and tropical fruits, and they also use New Oak to add body and secondary flavors like vanilla and spices for this wine. And then we have Oregon. It's a state has a generally warmer climate, and Chardonnay wines often have refreshing acidity and broad range of flavors from citrus fruits to tropical fruits. Production is relatively lower in comparison to California. So in Oregon, the production is relatively lower, therefore they focus on quality rather than quantity. And also these wines tend to be a mixture of like citrus fruits, stone fruits and tropical fruits, meaning that this wine should really offer a great value, great quality for their flavor profile in Oregon. So this is pretty much all we need to know about the regions of USA for Chardonnay wines. So now we are moving into Australia. It's a country that known to produce broad range of different styles from this Chardonnay grape variety. And Southeastern Australia, the wines that are labeled as Southeastern Australia, is a high volume Chardonnays that are labeled this way can be made from grapes grown in anywhere within a very broad area. Though often fruits for these wines come from warmer irrigated vineyards, sometimes they can be blended with other grapes like Semillon or with other cooler climate wines to achieve the balance. So if you see a label as Southeastern Australia on a Chardonnay wines, meaning that these grapes are grown in warmer climates with irrigated vineyards, and they can be even blended with Semillon or even cooler climate Chardonnays to achieve the balance, because they tend to have a lack of acidity levels, so that they need to achieve the acidity level so that these grape growers, the winemakers, can blend these wines from cooler climate, or they can even blend with other grape varieties to achieve their style. And they tend to produce high volume, inexpensive wines. And then we have Adelaide Hills. It's cooled by altitude. Because of the high elevation hills, they produce high quality Chardonnay wines, while Yarra Valley region in Victoria cooled by currents from South Ocean. So in Yarra Valley, they cooled by South Ocean, the cooling currents, and the Adelaide Hills, they cooled by the altitude because of the high elevation of these vineyards. They tend to produce very good to outstanding wines, like it says, with a stone fruit flavor, sometimes with tropical fruit flavors, medium to high acidity, and carefully balanced oak flavors. So these wines, it's a mixture of stone fruits and tropical fruit flavors along with a balanced, carefully used oak flavors in these wines from Adelaide Hills as well as Yarra Valley. And we have Margaret River region in Western Australia produces low quantity with high quality Chardonnay wines consistently. So warm climate with cooling sea breezes helps to elongate the growing season. These wines are typically medium to full body with stone fruits and tropical fruit flavors. So Margaret River in Western Australia are known to produce high quality wines because of, even though it's a warmer climate region, because of this cooling sea breezes helps to elongate this growing season, to extend the growing season. Therefore these wines are typically medium to full bodied with strong fruits and tropical fruit flavors mixture like peach, apricot, pineapple, banana, passion fruit, etc. So they are quite high quality wines and they produce consistently. So now we are moving into New Zealand and starting with the Marlborough region. So Marlborough is basically located on the northern tip of South Island in New Zealand. So New Zealand is divided into two different islands, the North Island and South Island. So Marlborough is located in the northern tip of South Island and it has a cool to moderate climate conditions throughout the year. So also it influenced with the cooling sea breezes as well as high levels of rainfall. They produce very high quality Chardonnay wines with ripe melon, lemon, and peach characteristics with some subtle oak flavors, and also they have naturally high levels of acidity because of these growing conditions in their vineyards. And then we move on to the Hawke's Bay. It's located on the east coast of North Island. So basically, Hawke's Bay is located on the northern island in the east coast with a moderate climate. So Chardonnay is most widely planted grape variety in this Hawke's Bay region, and it produces wines fuller bodied that are balanced by high acidity and flavors of stone fruit. So basically, Hawke's Bay Chardonnays are fuller bodied, and also they tend to have stone fruits, tropical fruit characteristics, and it's balanced with high levels of natural acidity as well. So Marlborough is in South Island, Hawke's Bay is in North Island. So Marlborough produce light to medium bodied refreshing styles of Chardonnay, while Hawke's Bay produces fuller bodied style wines with stone fruits, tropical fruit characteristics in New Zealand. Moving on to Chile, Casablanca Valley is a sub-region in Chile, so it receives sea breezes and morning fogs from Pacific Ocean. Therefore, it produces refreshing styles of Chardonnay with citrus fruits, stone fruit flavors. So in Casablanca, they have sea breezes, cooling influences from the sea, and they produce this refreshing style Chardonnay with citrus fruits and stone fruit characteristics. And then we have Central Valley in Chile. It's a larger and more warmer region, and it's produced wines in range of style and quality levels. So in Central Valley, it's much more broader, much more larger, as well as it's warmer region, and it produces wines with different quality levels. So it's inexpensive high volume brands to outstanding wines that are made in high altitude vineyards. So within the Central Valley, there are vineyards located in high altitude, meaning it's high elevation, so they tend to produce very high quality outstanding wines because of this elevation, and also they produce inexpensive high volume brands in Central Valley as well, in flatter vineyards as well. So in Chile, we need to know about Casablanca Valley and Central Valley. Even in Central Valley, with the high elevation, they are able to produce high quality wines from Chardonnay. And we are moving on to South Africa. It's quite interesting because South Africa are known to produce very high quality Chardonnay wines as well. So especially Western Cape, hot inland vineyards are dedicated to produce high volume wines where Chardonnay is sometimes blended with Chenin Blanc. So in South Africa, in Western Cape, because of these vineyards are located in inland areas, they're dedicated to produce high volume, inexpensive wines from Chardonnay, and also they often blend with Chenin Blanc to add more acidity, more character to these wines. While Walker Bay in coastal area, among the coolest in South Africa due to its exposure to the strong sea breezes from south. So Walker Bay is located on the coastal region and is one of the coolest regions in South Africa because of this strong sea breezes from this ocean, and has a reputation to produce high quality Chardonnay with ripe stone fruits and tropical fruit flavor. Honestly, the Walker Bay Chardonnays are outstanding wines with flavors of stone fruits and tropical fruits. And they also have high demand for these wines and quite command such a high prices for these wines. Chardonnay today. So Chardonnay used to suffer in market due to its association with the heavy oak in 80s and 90s, but in today, winemakers are carefully use the oak to not to overpower the primary flavors of this grape variety. So Chardonnay used to suffer in the market because of this bad reputation in 90s, and 80s. They tend to have heavily oak influenced wines made from Chardonnay, so people did not really like them. But in today's world, the winemakers are constantly take initiatives not to use oak barrel or to use oak during winemaking process as not to overpower the primary flavors from grape variety. So Chardonnay tend to showcase the oak influence more clearly than other well-known grape varieties like Pinot Grigio and Sauvignon Blanc. Unlike other grape varieties like Pinot Grigio or Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay tend to showcase the flavors of oak more clearly, more easily. As you take a sniff, as you take a sip, you can clearly feel the oak influence of the wine. And in premium market, Chardonnay tend to attribute to its origin and wine expertise experience. meaning that high quality age worthy Chardonnay wines tend to indicate the sense of origin. Like as you take a snip, you can literally think of the place where these wines are origin, like Burgundian Grand Cru wines, Premier Cru wines, or Californian high quality Chardonnay. These wines tend to showcase the expertise of these winemakers as well as where the grapes are grown. So they kind of communicate the origin of these grape varieties. These Chardonnays have great potential to evolve in the bottle, and many wine lovers are willing to pay such high. So these wines undoubtedly has a great potential to evolve further in the bottle and benefit from this further aging and develop more tertiary fruit flavors like hazelnuts, mushrooms, and other dried fruit characteristics. And also the wine lovers and enthusiasts from all around the world, they are willing to pay for these high quality Chardonnay wines made by these expert winemakers in the world. So this is pretty much all that we need to focus on when it comes to Chardonnay for WSET level 2. Need to know about these renowned wine regions across the world, as well as their characteristics, flavor profile, and how these winemaking options can influence these styles of the Chardonnay wines. So if you find this video useful, please do subscribe to my channel so that I can continue to make these videos, make these contents for you to prepare for your WSET level 2 qualification in wines. And yeah, I'm going to see you in the module 11 of our journey with Sauvignon Blanc. And until then, everyone have a great time ahead.